Hi, I'm Rene Ritchie. Leo Laporte is on special assignment. Today on MacBreak Weekly, we talked about Apple security, locking out battery health information, and what it would take to make the iPhone Pro.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 674 for Tuesday, August 13th, 2019. Treat it like a burrito.
MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by LastPass, the #1 most preferred password manager. Just remember your master password and let LastPass remember the rest. Visit lastpass.com/twit to learn more. And by Molecule. Molecule's reimagining the future of clean air, starting with the air purifier. For $75 off your first order, visit molecule.com and enter the promo code MacBreak. And by Epson EcoTank printers. Kiss expensive cartridges goodbye. Add an Epson EcoTank printer to your home or office. EcoTank comes with a ridiculous amount of ink. Just fill and chill. Check out epson.com/EcoTankLeo to learn more.
It's time for MacBreak Weekly. I'm Rene Ritchie because Leo Laporte is still off, I imagine, trying to find some kind of 5G in the greater San Francisco area. But we still have a show to do. And joining me, just like he does every week, the rock of MacBreak Weekly, Andy Ihnatko. How are you, Andy?
5G is really easy to find in any city. Just look for the place where people have like huge bags of like frozen peas on top of their phones to keep them cool.
That is true. That is true. Especially when they live in sunny Sacramento, like Lory Gill. How's it going, Lory?
Yeah, and bags of oranges and avocados. We're just rife with 5G and all the good stuff because of our sunny weather.
All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is Apple went back to Black Hat. Sorry, Ivan Kirstic, Apple's head of security platform and architecture, went back to Black Hat. The last time he was there 3 years ago, they announced the original bug bounty program, which at the time offered up to $250,000 if you could find an exploit in iOS or iCloud. This year, he announced that the program was expanding to include macOS, watchOS, tvOS, all the OSs, but also they were going to kick up the bounty, not just to $500,000, but with a bunch of different bonuses and different factors, including a 50% bonus if you could find a beta bug. It could hit 1 million. And Dr. Evil pinky finger to mouth, $1 million. But there was more, like in a ShamWow sense, there really was more. They also announced a research-fused device because it can be really hard for researchers to get into iOS to begin with, to do all of their research. So instead of hiding away their own full chain exploits or buying a developer-fused phone off the gray-black market, Apple is going to provide a phone with SSH and root terminal access to any researcher who has a history of finding just these kinds of exploits. Andy, is it a whole new, whole warm, whole awesomer day when it comes to Apple and security researchers?
Somebody was visited by 3 ghosts in the middle of the night in Cupertino for sure, because this addresses a couple of things that have been super important. Number one, you really do have to encourage people to find your bugs and your security flaws and show you where they are. And you have to understand that it is a competitive market for this stuff. There are lots of people who are security researchers. They are on the side of the angels, and they will even begrudgingly, after saying, "Hey, look, I've told you about this bug like 8 months ago, and you still haven't fixed it. I'm just going to make it public. You got 3 days to fix it." And then when the company says, "Oh, but we're really going to fix it," okay, fine, I'll delay it another month. But most people are like, "Hey, foreign local government, how much am I willing to bid for this way to get into any locked iPhone anywhere?" So the fact that they're willing to put their money where their mouth is by actually producing a really highly competitive bug bounty and also giving these researchers the tools they need to find those bugs means that when they put up those big posters about how private and secure iPhones are, they really are thinking of the inside of the donut as well as the outside of the donut. So that's a really good sign.
Yeah, what was interesting, Lory, is that previously they would, the researchers would say that one, because they needed to have their own exploits just to get into iOS to do research, they didn't want to tell Cupertino about it because that would lock them out of their own research phones. And also they had to try to get these phones off the gray market. Meanwhile, foreign intelligence agencies, sort of known bad actors, and even the companies that sell equipment to both of those were offering like 1.5 million for a 0 day.
Yeah, so this is a great thing that Apple is inviting the white hat hackers to come in and break these iPhones so that when it comes to market, when we get them in our hand, when we get the software updates in our hands, we're not seeing these unexpected glitches and bugs and security vulnerabilities. Especially when you think about what people, just like you're saying, on the gray market, who they can still get these things. They can just get them, through other means. And so they're still going to be doing these kinds of hacking schemes. And this way Apple can say, we want you to do this for us directly. So we're going to pay you as much as we can to make sure that you do this for us and that you don't sell this information to someone else. Or even, this idea of like the right way to do it, the sort of appropriate culturally way to do this, which would be to tell Apple, for example, hey, I found an exploit and I'm going to give you 90 days to fix it, or whatever that time limit is. What if they can't fix it in 90 days? And, just like you're saying, Andy, sometimes they'll say, oh, well, okay, we'll postpone a little bit longer. But frankly, some of the people in the hacker industry make their name by finding these exploits. And so they're not opposed to, I gave them the amount of time that I'm supposed to give them, and they didn't say anything, so I'm telling the world. And their names are known, and their reputation is important too. So being able to be on the inside of this situation where Apple can have a little more control over who finds these bugs and how quickly they get fixed, I think is a really great thing. I think the device that they get to access it is maybe not worth more than the $1 million bounty, but worth a lot.
Yeah.
It was super interesting to me because they said that so far in the history of this program, which is around 3 years, 50 high value, high quality bugs have been reported and paid out through it. But it seems to me, Andy, like it's like what Steve Jobs used to say about iTunes, is that if you give people an ethical way to do something at a fair price, they're more likely to do it. And I think this addresses, by removing the barrier of the full chain exploit and also paying out a lot more, I think that really promotes people to find their ethicalness.
Yeah, and I think that people who are not ethical, they're always going to go for the money. So that's not going to affect them so much. I think what this does, I think it helps to breed another generation of ethical hackers who feel as though their work is being respected. I'll give you an example from my own personal life from 2 weeks ago, partly because I'm still stewing a little bit over this. I live in a 350-year-old seaport town, which means that there are like a million little streets as opposed to big streets. And so a 2 or 3 FedEx packages that were supposed to go to a store at number whatever on a different similar street got delivered to my place instead. And I said, well, you know what? I'm kind of going that way anyway, and I know I'll just carry them over there rather than have FedEx. It's a store. Maybe there's merchandise they need. And so I walked. Maybe it was only a half a mile, but they're not like they were really heavy packages, but they were hard to carry because they were bulky. And so I walked to the counter to talk to the store owners. Oh, by the way, FedEx delivered these to my address by mistake. I thought you might like them. And they basically said, oh, great, thanks. You can put it over there. And I felt like I felt like this was my Curb Your Enthusiasm moment where, I would come back, I'm you didn't really thank me last week when I dropped over the package. It really was it's no problem, but yeah, that wasn't really a thank you that you gave me. And so what I'm saying is that previously Apple was kind of notorious for saying, oh, wow, yeah, oh, you say this bug could make anybody be able to get into anybody's phone remotely from anywhere on the internet? Oh, okay, great. What's your email address? Okay, great, thanks. That's nice. And you're like, I just saved your butts. I just saved you from being the top story in the tech news cycle for an entire week, and you're just saying, oh, okay, thanks. And so a bug bounty is not just good money, which it is good money, but it's also, look, we are thanking you. We are appreciative. And one way to show you how much we appreciate it is to give you money for this sort of thing.
And it's not invitation only anymore. It's like anybody can take part in this. If you find something that is worrisome and you send it to Apple and you're not on the list, they will still pay out, and they will probably not even invite you to the list, because there is no list anymore, Lory. You could be on this bug bounty program tomorrow if you get your hacks together.
If I join the hacker industry, that's been my goal all along, was to break my way into the hacker industry.
So one of the other subjects that came up at Black Hat was on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and that is this gentleman spent a lot of time in his kitchen modifying a lightning cable so that it could be used to take over your machine if you plugged it in. And we've seen different kinds of juice jacking attacks in the past, which are basically when you modify the firmware of USB cables in order to make them malicious, to carry a malicious payload. What makes this interesting is that it's a lightning cable, which I think they said was harder to do this on, but he still managed to do it in his kitchen and has plans to sort of mass produce these devices. And Lory, I don't know how you stop this kind of stuff. I know they keep hardening the operating system, but it feels like we already get so many complaints from the Mac community about Macs being locked down. And then on the other side, you get people like this just getting up into your Macs. And I don't know ultimately how we balance this.
I think the crazy thing that I took from that article specifically was that, yes, I figured out how to do this, and now I'm going to make hundreds of them for anybody who wants to buy one. That's the part that scared me about it. It's not just the discovery of it, it's the fact that somebody wants everybody to have access to one of these things. I guess in this particular instance, it's good to hear that the lightning cable is harder to hack than I think he even said than any other cable that he has tried to, or that person tried to, or has hacked. But I think that's almost why people are trying so hard to hack into Apple products, is it's difficult to do, so they want to do it, So your question of what can be done about it, I don't think there is an answer. I think the answer is what Apple's doing now, which is offering large bounties and attending the White Hacker Conference and saying we want to be a part of this community too. We don't want to shut you out. We want to bring you in, so that in circumstances like this person who figured out a way to juice jack the lightning cable, somebody on Apple's team, or somebody who's working with Apple in the hacker community can say, hey, I just figured out a way to stop that from happening, so we're good. So I think that's what's being done now is what we can do. The balance would be all the people that are trying to break into Apple products. If there's equally enough people who are trying to find those breaks and tell Apple about it, that's the best balance that we can get.
Well, this demonstrates that this is an industry with a very complex market. He wouldn't be. I'm sure that if his goal were to simply spread chaos and help people to break into random phones, he wouldn't have announced this. He wouldn't have made this really, really public. I think this was a way to tell everybody how cool, how smart he is, because that was a very clever hack. But also to tell that all the world's security agencies that if you want to, if you approach me and give me $5,000 per unit, and I will sell you these cables, because as soon as I saw this, assuming that it really does look like a completely undoctored lightning cable, and all the pictures that I've seen have been just like stock images of like Apple cable, so I don't know that for sure. Yeah. But that's how they described it, that it could pass for a normal cable. I don't see it as someone trying to get after me or trying to get after a random person for their credit card information. I see it as a spy agency or a law enforcement agency getting a warrant, breaking into somebody's office, and just simply like replacing one of their cables, this person's cables, with this special cable. Or, as has been happening with like flash drives loaded with malware, just, hey, what do you know? Some idiot left their iPhone charger and cable like plugged in right here in the waiting room of CIA headquarters. Shoink! That's my cable. So that's the sort of people who are going to be buying this. I think this is really advertising to sell this to, again, the espionage community, the law enforcement community. I hope we don't see this in the wild, because that would be a hell of a thing for someone to try to sneak a lightning cable into my bag and make sure that I use it.
And then also be less than 300 feet away from you when you were trying to use it. I think I remember that was the
Wi-Fi
other
based,
restriction. Yeah. So, but it's still
Tom Riddle's diary, Lory. It's Tom Riddle's diary.
It's still, even though it's we hear a lot about, especially every year when they have the White Hacker event, we hear a lot of the people, they come out and they say, this is what I've done. This is what I can do. Here's the thing. I think there's another one that came out that you can spoof Face ID by using a pair of glasses with just some tape on it. These are a big deal. So to us, we're freaked out.
It's our responsibility. It's our responsibility as journalists, because that's always the headline. And saying, "Oh, someone has finally broken Face ID." It says, "Okay, A, you have to prepare a special pair of glasses. B, you have to put them on a person who is asleep, deep asleep, and unconscious." And so it's not as though someone's going to be able to put on the magic glasses that gives them a godlike power to unlock iPhones. But yeah, I love what I love about the week after these conferences is, again, how clever everybody is to just keep trying things, because I think I really do think that one of the shared like geek youth culture experiences is the time you learned to like pick your first lock, or the time you first learned how to pop open like a master high school lock, and that it leaves you with this wonderful mind expanding concept from like your teenage years onward, that all locks are a lie. It's any lock can be, any security can be defeated. Just depends on thinking of a way that the people who designed this either didn't think of or didn't think that you would bother to try. So it's that just shows you the ingenuity that's at work here.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny because a couple of years ago. Sorry, go ahead, Lory.
The hackers are absolutely incredible and talented and geniuses to come up with these ideas, and it's such a fun culture to. The whole point is to just see what you can do, see how you can break it, and it's I almost think it does them a disservice, the white hat hackers especially, a disservice when we report on it as it's some kind of scary thing, because it's actually really fun and really funny that they've been able to figure out something like that. And just the fact that it exists in the world also means that companies like Apple, in the case of Face ID, maybe they're going to work a little harder to make sure that the attention awareness is actually more specific to the 3D-ness of your pupils, even when you're wearing glasses or something like that. So it's all a lot of fun, and most of the time not scary.
The funniest time is not when like TechCrunch or Forbes does a deep dive or Motherboard does a deep dive after the presentation. It's when some journalists at faster moving sites get the abstracts for the talk a week or 2 weeks before they come out, and then just write all these scary articles based off nothing but the one-line blurb at Black Hat before the talk comes. But for this one, I think it's a really valid point, Lory, because some of these things are presented as scary, but like a person being unconscious, that's the least of your concerns is someone with Face ID. I remember, like, was it a year ago where a woman waited for her husband to fall asleep on a flight, then put his finger on his Touch ID, opened his phone, saw the sneaker text that he was looking at, and got so angry they had to land the flight. And she's not a security researcher. She's just smart, and she knew the information she wanted, and she knew how to get it. And that, we've seen Face ID exploits where people have put white tape on their eyes and things to get around it. So biometrics, again, they're better. They're not passwords. They're usernames. And if you use them and you're rendered unconscious or incapacitated, there's all sorts of things that can happen. So I think it's just, like you said, a really good reminder of what the limits are to the convenience that you're getting from them.
Yeah.
So our MacBreak tip of the week is that if you're fooling around on your wife or girlfriend, make sure you just press that power button 5 times before you go to sleep, just to deactivate all biometrics.
Yeah, I've been saying this for a while now. I think we should have the option for passcodes and biometrics, and not one or the other. I think that would be the best.
So Craig mentioned that. Craig mentioned that at the last WWDC, because a lot of people have asked for that, and he said that the only problem is when they test it, if it's like a thumbprint and a passcode, and you burn your thumb, you can't get it into your phone anymore. So then you have to have like a longer recovery password hidden somewhere, and most people forget what those are and lock themselves out of their phones.
Yeah, but again, if it were an option, if it were a third option, passcode or face or touch ID, and your third option, if you're the kind of person who cheats on your spouse and you really want to protect your private stuff, the third option being that you can go ahead and enable that. I think that's I don't know. I just like that idea. It gives just that extra step password of protection. Yeah, real long one.
All right, so the last bit of news that is not really tied to this, but I am going to tie to this, is a story came out about Apple and third-party repairs. And this story involves, we've heard previously about how difficult it is to pair Touch ID sensors or Face ID sensors if you swap out some of the other components. Now what was discovered, it was originally on a YouTube channel by Justin, and iFixit has picked up the story, is that Apple is doing the pairing with batteries. They've had the capability for a long time. It's been on Apple's website since at least March that they would be doing this, but now people are seeing it in the wild. And what it basically means, it was misreported a little bit in that Apple was locking out third-party batteries, and that caused a lot of people to panic, especially people in countries that just don't have Apple stores or authorized Apple repair people. They're not locking out the batteries. You can still replace a battery. Anybody can still replace a battery. The only thing is, if you replace a battery and you're not authorized by Apple, which means you don't have Apple's tools, you can't repair that battery with the iOS software, which means those new battery monitoring features that were introduced a couple of years ago that show you your battery health no longer functions. Instead, they give you this warning that says that this battery was not replaced by Apple and this feature was no longer going to work. And we've seen a lot of reactions from this. Some people in the right to repair movement have been just completely flabbergasted. They're enraged by it. They see it as yet another encroach by Apple into the freedoms an individual has to control their phone. Other people have pointed out that if you're just buying a phone, for example, it's nice to know that it doesn't have an Apple replaced battery. I think, Lory Gill, I'll pass it to you first because you had an awesome idea for a pop-up instead of just turning it off. But what are your quick thoughts on this?
Yeah, so just right out of the gate, I think in this particular circumstance, I don't think that Apple is doing its users, its customers, a service to, it's not locking down the battery, it's locking down that specific feature of the battery health by saying just, no, there's nothing there except we can't determine whether or not this has a good or bad battery health because it's not and that's all it says. So to me, that's a disservice to the user, because if I choose to, which they are now, they're easing up on that third-party battery situation or third-party repair situation, not battery, allowing Apple support to change batteries that were originally replaced or repaired by a third party. So they're moving in the right direction, but then to see this, it's sort of a backtrack because they're saying it's fine if you have a third party repair your battery, but we're going to remove this useful feature, which is to give you the battery health information. Now, I think, Rene, you had suggested, I think that what would be a benefit or would work better is for Apple to give you that notification. Kind of like when you plug in a device that's not MFi compatible, so it'll say, "We're sorry, this device is not compatible with the iPhone," and you just swipe it away, and a lot of times it still works, even though you get that notification. So a pop-up that says, "We can't determine whether or not the battery of this health is actually what it is. So this is actually just an estimate. Don't use it." But then you swipe it away, and you're choosing whether or not you want to base that information on what you think is to be correct or not. I think that's fair. That's telling you that you've got a third-party repair or battery in your phone, and therefore Apple's not responsible for it if something goes wrong. But it still allows the user to use that battery health feature. It doesn't just completely disable that feature for them just because it was done. The repair was done somewhere else. Even with an official battery. That also kind of gives me a little tingle in the back of my neck. Is it can be an official Apple battery, but if it's done if it's repaired at a third-party repair company, then it seems like a punishment. It feels like a punishment to me.
Yeah, that's definitely a way that Apple could extend their "We're awesome" policy to people who even get their repairs done outside of Apple, because it's certainly possible. Actually, it's happening. You could get if you buy you can buy an Apple logoed battery from a third party, like if you buy them on eBay, and it is legitimately, it's not a knockoff. It's legitimately an Apple product. But before it was sent out, it can be reprogrammed so that it said, oh, actually, instead of getting 5,000 cycles, this has only had like 80 cycles, and the capacity is actually exactly what it was from the factory, when it's actually maybe 80% of what it was from the factory. And so that's the sort of situation where you kind of want those kind of features for the phone to itself do its own testing of the battery, and after a couple of weeks be able to figure out what the status of this battery is by empirical evidence and give you an accurate guess as to what the state of charge is at any given moment. And we can in the United States, we can be a little bit we can maybe make the argument that, well, Apple does make sure that battery replacement is really, really cheap. They don't charge for labor; they just charge for the battery. You know, you're getting a certified Apple brand new battery. So what's the difficulty? But you have to remember that not every place in the world, not even every place in the United States, has close access to an Apple store where you can walk in and then walk out an hour later with a fresh battery. And also, what about the people who are holding on to like a 5 or 6 year old phone? I think that Apple builds their phones so nicely that as long as you can keep it out of toilet water, you might be able to get 5, 6, 7 years out of the device.
Sometimes even if it's in a toilet water.
When it falls in the toilet, Neptune can have it. It belongs to Aquaman at that point, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm not gonna shame anybody who has dropped their iPhone in a toilet, because I have been one of those people and still used it afterwards. So
I'm just saying that's my subconscious saying I really, really, really want to upgrade my phone in a month. but that's fine. But basically, I think Lory and I are of the same mind here. That I think that it's an important principle that this is your phone. You own this phone. You can do what you want with this phone. And if Apple is making a choice to make that difficult, and they're just being kind of churlish about it. And I'm not saying that this is one of those times, but if there's a simple thing they can do to support people who are repairing their own phones, or a simple thing they could do to at least not get in the way, they should at least not get in the way. So this is something where I think they could really help people out.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think that, because again, especially because there are people who just don't live near Apple stores or Apple certified repair people. There's whole countries like that, and they need the same level of service. And to me, the pop-up idea, so it's disclosed, so everybody knows it's not an official. And I think the reason the official Apple batteries don't work is because they're not paired either. And that leads into a larger conversation about whether Apple should be making the software that does this, that does all the pairings, more widely available. And I think for something like Touch ID and Face ID, you could say that maybe it's bad because people who steal iPhones would be able to use it then to get around, or government agencies would be able to use it then to get around security measures. But for things like a battery, just a stripped down version that let people run a set of tests, and if it passes those tests, pairs up that battery, I think that would be phenomenal. And I don't think that would intrude. There should be safety. I always worry about lithium ion because you do see headlines, like there was a young lady a week ago, and there was a guy with a fire on his desk, and I think they were iPhones. It's hard to tell sometimes based on the reporting. So I do think there should be safety and quality standards for these batteries, especially if you are getting them from sources you don't know about. But otherwise, let people have the best possible service they can have. It seems like that's keeping with Apple's philosophy, with what Lisa Jackson talks about when she says making those iPhones last as long as possible. Yeah. All right, so with 100%. That, I think we should check in with Leo and see how his search for the elusive 5G is going.
Hey, if I might, I'd just like to jump in here and tell you about our sponsor of this week's episode of MacBreak Weekly, LastPass. They like me to talk about it because I use it. I've been using it since they came out with it. Steve Gibson interviewed the creator of LastPass, Joe Segrist, got all the code. He gives it his thumbs up. In fact, Steve Gibson, our security guy, uses it. We even use it here at work, LastPass Enterprise. LastPass is the #1 most preferred password management, an award-winning security solution that helps millions of individuals, thousands of businesses navigate their online lives easily and securely. Passwords are a nightmare. Everybody admits it. But you got to have them, and you got to remember them. And you may be tempted because they're such a pain in the butt to use the same password over and over. Bad idea. You might also be tempted to use something easy to remember. Another bad idea. Your birth date, your children's middle names, that kind of thing. That's easy to remember. It's also easy to guess for bad guys. You need LastPass. LastPass generates strong passwords and remembers them, so you don't have to. You just remember your master password, let LastPass do the rest. No wonder it's the #1 most preferred password manager, both at home and at work. In fact, we're really excited because LastPass Enterprise is expanding. They've got a brand new business lineup. That's what we use here at TWiT, with fantastic new features that will improve security across your company while making it easy for users to get their work done. I'll start with LastPass Enterprise. That's the business password manager we use. They now include single sign-on for 1,200 plus SAML integrated apps. That means you don't have to use a password manager. You just approve it on your phone and you're in. And that is great for convenience, but it's also more secure. It's kind of a win-win. Each app comes with its own getting started guide, so it's very easy to set up and get running. You're going to love SSO in the enterprise. There's also LastPass MFA. It's an extension to two-factor authentication. It's multi-factor. It leverages things like biometrics, your face, your fingerprint, and contextual factors, your location, your IP address, to verify you are who you say you are. And it does this all in an easy-to-manage dashboard for admins so you get oversight and control. We love it. I am very excited about these two new features. They call it all LastPass Identity. It's a combination of LastPass Enterprise, LastPass Multi-Factor, from single sign-on and password management to adaptive authentication. LastPass still is the #1 solution, giving you granular control and frictionless access to users in one simple, secure solution. We use it at TWiT. We're proud to be using it. We will always use it. And we're really excited as LastPass gets better and better and better. LastPass, bridging the gap between passwords and identity by making access and authentication simple and secure for both IT and end users. Join the thousands of businesses like ours that have signed up for LastPass and are loving it and trusting it. Visit LastPass.com/TWiT to find out how they can help you. LastPass.com/TWiT. Thank you, LastPass, for supporting MacBreak Weekly. Now back to the show.
And we are back with Andy Ihnatko and Lory Gill. And Lory Gill, I want to ask you something because you've now had your Apple Card for a little while. And we're starting to see reviews. We're starting to see pros. We're starting to see some cons. We're starting to see people getting approved who didn't think they would, and maybe people who thought they would not, maybe. So now that you've been using it for a while, what do you think?
So for a while means yesterday.
Yes.
So let me just say it hasn't been long enough for me to even go out of the house and use it. I've actually just been using it to buy things through the App Store just so I can sample it out. But right out of the gate, it was obviously the easiest application experience I've ever had. That's almost a negative because it's going to be very easy for everyone to apply for this card.
Suspiciously easy to apply for this card.
Yeah, I mean, I immediately
I'm 12 years old
and
I just got, no, that didn't happen.
I was starting to have application remorse just a little bit today because I haven't gotten a new credit card. I haven't added credit to my life in probably 15 years. So it was so easy to do yesterday that I didn't think about it. And then this morning I was like, oh man, I just added a bunch of credit to my life. What was I thinking? Why did I do that? So let me just tell everybody, like, before you hit that accept Apple terms button, think about the fact that you're adding credit to your life. That's a big deal. So I don't regret it, but I was feeling a little bit funny about it this morning. So the application process is incredibly easy. And it seems silly, but one of my favorite things is the terms and conditions are so clear and written so simply that I don't think I've ever read a terms of condition for anything that made as much sense to me. And I actually read almost all of it.
It wasn't the iTunes people who wrote it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. They're always kind of long, but this one was actually not as long as I've seen, and it was clear and easy to understand. So that was, to me, actually surprisingly impressive. I got, I'll go ahead and say my credit score with TransUnion, which is who they run the credit through. It was 793. So that's within the excellent credit score rating that most people have. My interest rate was 17.99, which because I'm in the excellent section, I actually was hoping for it to be lower, but I have 2 other credit cards that are almost the exact same percentage rate. So it's about average. It's about normal for my credit rating versus my interest rate. So I think because Apple came out of the gate announcing that they were going to have really low interest rates, I think they said something like one of the industry's lowest. And that's true at the lowest end, at the 13.99. That's very low. But I think we all kind of jumped on that fact and thought, oh, well, I've got great credit rate. I've got a great credit score. So therefore, I'm going to get that super low interest rate. But that's not necessarily true. Now, I have talked to a few people on Twitter who did get the 12.99. So it's not impossible. It's just that it's not as easy to get to 12.9 as we all wanted it to be. So at 17.99, that's not unreasonable. That's about average. So going into that, when you're thinking about applying, obviously, whether or not you're concerned with that credit, that interest rate, you can apply without it affecting your credit score as long as you don't accept the terms and conditions. So you can go into the app once you receive your invitation. For now, it's not available to everyone yet. You still have to be invited at the moment.
But some people said that they got approved when they didn't think they would. Like they thought their score was so low they wouldn't even get in. And it looks like Apple is kind of going broad with it.
Exactly. So on the one hand, those of us who think that, we think we're better than 17.99 and we want it to be lower, we're complaining about wanting it to be lower. But there's hundreds of people who are being approved that didn't think that their credit score was good enough. And Andy, I think you joke about how if you were approved, then the world is in trouble. You might be approved. I think I've talked about this. I think in the way Apple is positioning this, they're showing their software as being a way for you to get control over your credit and to have a better financial future and understanding what owning a credit card is. Andy, for somebody like you, I think this is great because this gives you the opportunity to reset or to start over or to start from scratch. I don't know what it's like for people who have zero credit history, but I do know that people who thought that they had a poor credit score are getting approved. And this could be a real good thing for them because there's this tool right inside the app that lets you make your payment. I just bought, I don't know, maybe $7 worth of apps just since yesterday. I could go pay it off right now if I want to. I don't even have to wait for the balance. You can pay you can make one-time payments where you pay off or pay a certain amount, or you can schedule them out so that you never even have to remember them. It'll just automatically pay a certain amount every month, or you can wait until the bill comes in and then pay it. It's all done right on your iPhone, which a lot of people, that's how they do a lot of things, is right from their phone now. They don't go to their computer. They don't write a check. They don't, do all these other things. It's so convenient. It's right in front of them. So to have that sort of quick, easy to access payment plan, on top of the fact that there's all these tools that help you understand what you're doing and how much you're spending, it shows you gives you a very easy to understand layout of where your spending is happening. So as you're either starting over and trying to do better with your credit, or if you're a first-time credit card owner, these are all excellent tools to help you get better at having credit. So I think it's great that Apple and that Goldman Sachs are, I think it's called subprime, if I'm not mistaken, that's yep. allowing people with lower credit scores to access subprime lending, which is allowing them to access this. Now, the negative of that is subprime lending also means the slightly higher credit score. So when Apple said that they have the lowest in the industry, that was probably under this sort of example or understanding of the subprime loan. And if I'm not mistaken, my first credit card, which was, it was part of that sort of subprime thing, it was 23%. So that's all within the standard that Apple is going with, or that Goldman Sachs is going with, which is if we're going to be giving out loans or credit to people who have low credit scores or no credit history, we're going to have to compensate a little bit by having a slightly higher interest rate, for the people who think that they deserve the lower interest rate. So I think it's all balancing out in the end. And if I have 1799 in order for somebody to get a better credit history, to like learn how to use credit cards, then I'm on board for that. It's all about being there together with each other, helping each other out, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's if Apple is in this to benefit people with poor or no credit history. It'd be nice if that was it. I think that part of it is that they really there's a reason why this card has it has no annual fees, but it also has some of the skimpiest benefits of any card that's offered anywhere. You don't get air mile points, you don't get credit points. There aren't. I don't have the tab in front of me, but you can get on Mastercard.com has a page for here are the special programs that's available to you. You get basic buyer protection, a couple other simple things, but a lot of the stuff that you would get with a standard Mastercard any place else, you're not going to get there. So I think that Apple and Goldman Sachs are expecting that most of the people signing up for this are going to be people who will buy it, will get this card because it works so well within the Apple ecosystem of having the Apple Watch and the Apple phone, and also, but not because it's competitive as a regular credit card. So the only thing that worries me, and I think I expressed this when we first started discussing this several months ago, is that when you're offering credit to people with no credit history or actively bad credit history, you run the risk that you are allowing somebody who doesn't understand credit or is impulsive or doesn't purchase or manage credit responsibly to take out loans at 24.5% interest. That if they can't pay the balance every month, how are they going to be able to pay the balance plus 25% every month? And that's just the way things work with credit cards, but that's a really, really bad looking color on Apple. If a year from now or 2 years from now, they're Newsweek, if The Verge or anybody else is saying has all these horror stories about people who not on top of my student loans, I also can't quit. I have to live till 73 because I got to pay Apple back for the laptop I bought $1 million. 5 years ago. Yeah. So it's I'm still navigating Apple's reasons for doing this. And I'm sure that I feel as though this is going to be something that will be crystal clear in retrospect 3 years from now. For now, I still don't really know why they're getting into this.
Did you remember the rainbow card? Because everyone was tweeting pictures of the rainbow card from the Steve Jobs era. Like, get this card and buy. I did not remember that at all. And I didn't know that it existed. I forgot that it existed, and I forgot that it went away.
You could buy a windsurfer with the Apple logo on it from the Apple catalog at some point. It was a different time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was heady. Lory, there was also a story about how you should be careful because if you lose your iPhone, you may not be able to pay for your Apple card because it's not web friendly yet.
Yeah, so that's a big deal. I think, on the one hand, you think, well, obviously they didn't build it that way. It's all on the iPhone. And then as soon as somebody goes, well, wait, what if I lose my iPhone? Then all of us go, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. And it's so true. There's no dedicated website yet. There's no portal on the internet. So right now, I believe the article that popped up about the fact that Apple doesn't have an online web portal for you to access is that you have to contact Apple or Goldman Sachs to pay your bill, to freeze your card, to do any of the things that you would do.
Call them like an animal.
Yeah, and well, the thing is, if you've lost your iPhone, you've also lost your phone. So
better have an LTE Apple Watch. Come on.
And it's not such a big deal. It's not anything that everybody should, oh my God, I can't believe they didn't think of that. But the truth is that there probably should be a web portal so that we can go online if we don't have an easy access to a phone, and we can put a hold on our card. We can put a hold on the payments, or we can make the payment before we get our next phone or something like that. Because I think the other suggestion was use a different device connected with your Apple ID, like your iPad. Well, not everybody has all that stuff.
Yeah.
for now, I think it's good that we're still in the preview phase, because I think that it's a very good idea for Apple and Goldman Sachs to have a way for you to go online and manage your account like that. I just think that it makes sense for them to have that, and hopefully that's something they've got planned in the near future, so that when it rolls out to everybody, that this does exist. Because though it's not that big of a deal, you can always call Goldman Sachs, you can always call Apple and get transferred to a Goldman Sachs representative. You can't go online to do it, and I think we should have that.
I think that's indicative of a really weird thing that Apple keeps doing. That I sign up for two-factor authentication on my Apple account because, of course, I want to do that. But their idea of two-factor authentication is that you can sign into your Apple service or hardware using any other Apple piece of hardware. And so what happens when I've just installed I've just installed Apple Music on my new Android phone, and I'm in a coffee shop with my Android phone and my Chromebook, and it says, "Oh, great! No, we've sent a code to either your iPad or your MacBook back in the office." And I'm like, "This is not really hard, guys. I have a phone. You could text to that phone." And that's usually how it's done. Or I could just, use a third-party authentication service. But no, I've got to own another Apple device in order to authenticate. That doesn't seem to make sense. Again, that's you creating problems for me. And it feels like Apple's punishing me for marrying outside my faith, so to speak.
And by no means to excuse
really
Apple in any of this, but the digital thing is great as long as it works, but I've also been that person who's tried to sign into WhatsApp when the SIM card I originally used for it was probably sitting in a desk drawer in another country at the time. And I've also just tried to do basic things when you can't get an internet connection, or you can't, for some reason your mail's not loading, you can't get the thing off the email that has your reservation number for the hotel room, and all of a sudden this super convenient no problems, super easy stuff just breaks down, and you're left wishing that you'd written it down in a scrap of paper like it was in 1970.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so true.
All right, so in future-looking Apple news, we got a rumor from Coin 10. Apple has confused me so much. I no longer know what that character means anymore. Coin on Twitter that iPhone Pro, wow, Apple's getting really crazy with the names this year. And this source, I'll call it a source, it's a nameless Twitter account, but last year, right before the iPhone event, accurately predicted iPhone XS, XS Max, and XR, has predicted stuff about the iPad losing the headphone jack, about the iPad mini refresh. Some of the stuff hasn't come to pass yet, so we can't accurately grade all of it, but so far pretty much everything has been accurate. And so I started scratching my head. I know we've devalued the word pro. I mean, even Power Beats are pro now, and I'm sure someone could explain why. But it's non-obvious, I think, to people what the label pro means now. But Andy, what could make an iPhone Pro this September?
Really, the one thing that they could do that would make everybody say $100 more, done, would be Apple Pencil support, or even the stubby pencil support, because we had the Galaxy Note 10 launch last week, and I've spent all of like 90 minutes with one, and it just every time I hand it back, whether it's after 10 minutes in the demo area or 2 months with it in my office on loan. Boy, do I wish I had a Pop-Tart sized phone with a stylus, because when you can have a real responsive stylus that keeps up with you, when you can draw, when you can write, because sometimes you don't need to all you need to do is just write down a 6-digit number, and you don't have time to open up an app and then create a text, click into a text field and then tap, 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 tap. Every time I use that stylus, I wish that a real stylus were available for the iPhone, or a real stylus were available for pretty much any other phone. So there are other things that could be suggested, like amazing extra storage, and maybe a little bit larger, who knows? But really, I think that all they have to do to earn the Pro moniker, however Apple is choosing to define Pro nowadays, is add pencil support to the screen.
See, I thought you were going to go with USB-C. I thought it was so beautifully set up. What about you, Lory?
You see, you can't predict me. I'm a maverick. You zig and I zag.
I know. You zig when I zag.
I don't think this rumor is particularly. I don't go for it. If Alex Lindsay were here right now, he would be rolling his eyes at the idea of an iPhone being a Pro. And here's the thing. Again, Rene, you've pointed out that we use the word Pro to mean things that aren't Pro these days, and that's bad. And when it comes to an iPhone, literally what has anyone ever needed a phone to do Pro things on? Maybe photography, and that's more of a niche thing. It's not actually something that you do every day in your workflow. Like wedding photographers aren't throwing their DSLR cameras in the trash because now they have an iPhone. So there's no such thing as a Pro phone. And I can't imagine any hardware or software feature that would make a Pro version of a phone. Not, when what we have now, the XS and the XS Max, for example, those are kind of what you would consider to be like the proest of an iPhone. So it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think that there's a reason to make a phone into a Pro device. And I don't think anybody would be on board with that. And I think that it would, in marketing wise, I think that it would be a pretty negative on Apple, because they would have to prove that this phone is Pro worthy, which I don't think that exists yet. That technology to make something on your phone be something that is your dedicated everything device that you can stop using your computer to use, that it just doesn't seem possible to me.
So I got two suggestions. One is your iPhone can become your computer. You plug it in, or you use wireless the way you do with VR systems to go straight to a display, and then it throws up either the iPad or the Marzipan version of the OS, and you can use it with a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse to do like computery things. And then also like moto mods, so you could slap a much better camera or a lens mounting system on it. I know those things have never worked, but listen, an imaginary universe where they work amazingly well, or an extended battery, or an audio DAC, or something. Would that tickle the Pro buttons?
No, not for what people use iPhones for. It really is a good question, because there's so many things you could do to a laptop or a desktop to make it Pro, because you kind of understand what is a professional like desktop user. Okay, image editors, content creators, people who do like server work. What is a professional phone user? Usually, you're talking about like slick-haired car salesmen and real estate people. Yeah, exactly, and Instagrammers. So basically, how about a selfie lens that's about 2 inches wide, f1.1. automatically blurs.
I hear what you're saying, though. Alex Lindsay would want a terabyte of RAM and like 2 terabytes of storage on the phone for it to be Pro.
Right. And a battery.
I want to be able to run Windows 10
day.
in emulation. Yeah.
All right. So the other rumor we heard is that the iPad Pro might be getting even more Pro, basically by getting the same camera system as the iPhone is rumored to be getting, and that is either a 2-lens camera system on the lower end models, which would be the telephoto and the current wide angle, so it could do portrait mode and it could do all the stuff the current iPhone XS and XS Max could do. But also the higher end one would be getting the 3-lens system that would have that equilateral array for fancy math stuff like smart frame, where you could, if you cropped Lory out by accident or part of Andy's beard or a bit of that squirrel's tail, you could reframe it so that it shows all of the frame that you originally intended to show. But Andy, are we at the point where you need that quality of a camera on an iPad, or just want it for your squirrel photography fun?
I'd say so, because once we talk about iPad Pro, when you're on like the $329 budget iPad, you really are talking about, why are you taking pictures with that when you probably have a much better phone in your pocket? It's much more convenient. But when you're talking about a Pro, there are going to be people who will, as soon as you put that class of a camera on the iPad, someone will come up with a frame rig for it so that you can really and use it for legitimate 4K event photography. With it'll be like an aluminum frame with 2 handles and a gimbal and a rack for lights and a couple of microphones. There's going to be people who are going to be using it for AR, so that certainly makes sense. I would love to see Apple really leverage the idea that this is a huge piece of circuit real estate. Let's pack it full of let's not try to guess that people are not going to need a certain feature. If we have room for it, and if we can do it within the price frames that we have set for this product line, let's give them the better camera. It will only open this up to new uses and sell more of them to more deep-pocketed people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Andy. I'm surprised that Apple hasn't done a better job with the cameras on the iPad. At first, it made sense that they were keeping them, behind the iPhone in terms of pixel quality and things like that. But it didn't take long to realize that there's a lot of people out there that are using iPads for photography reasons or for video reasons, and I think it's a couple of years behind. I think it's about time Apple kind of push the iPad and iPad Pro camera specs up to par with the iPhone specs, because it's capable of handling it. So why not go ahead and do that? I think it's a really good idea, and it should have been done a long time ago.
Especially when you think about Photoshop is probably going to be available by the time at the end of this year. So when this new iPad comes out, Procreate is already burning barns with creatives. Imagine the ability to shoot the reference footage, or even shoot the primary photo and then edit it completely on this device and boom, shoot it off without ever having to do an import or ever having to worry about translation. That's just one way that people could use that, and I really think there's a long list of people that if they found out that there's a tablet with the same camera system as the latest iPhone, that would really move them from, you know what, I was thinking about getting a Windows tablet, I was thinking about getting this device instead. Now I'm definitely getting an iPad, because I've been using the iPad for other things, and the ability to put one thing in my bag and carry it with me on the plane and basically have most of my studio in this one magazine-sized object, that is a really big attractor.
The interesting thing for me is that when we did CES, we used to shoot with iPads because you would get such a big frame. Like, it was just such a big viewfinder, and it was really easy to get everything exactly. You knew it was tack sharp. You knew it was right there. But at the same time, you'd see people walk by going, taking a photo with your iPad. And that stigma doesn't go away. But I'm hoping that if it's a quote unquote real serious camera system, then people will be real serious about using it.
Yeah, it could be a PR problem, because if you think it's annoying enough being at concerts and people just holding up little phones, imagine them holding up like 8.5 by 11 tablets blocking your view. At least you'll be able to get a better view off their screen.
It's especially annoying when they're using a folio cover that they have dangling down. So they're taking a picture and there's just this thing dangling that happens. I see that happen out there in the world.
Remember the Your Verse campaign that Apple had? It was like a dum 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 dum, and you saw people on tops of mountains with their iPads in exactly those frame setups that Andy was talking about, and it just looked like they were carrying Thor's hammer around from peak to peak. Yep. So this is a complete tangent, but it occurred to me while we were talking about this, Andy, is we've seen some people criticizing Samsung's latest Galaxy Notes, saying they're falling behind Huawei when it comes to things like sensor size and pixel binning, because Huawei, I think they have 12-foot size sensors now inside those cameras, but they're doing at least 4-to-1 pixel binning, like 48 megapixel down to 12 megapixel. We've seen that Apple on the iPhone 11 looks like they're going to have bigger lenses, but do you think they need to start stretching their physical camera, their optics, to match what Huawei and some of the other Chinese vendors are doing?
Not really. Not until these really huge sensors can deliver results that actual regular users can relate to. You'll see all the photography blogs will do these really nice and detailed evaluations, all these pixel peeping sort of things about saying, oh, well, there's so much noise in the grays, and here's the gamut of this. When really phone users are not people who care about to see spectrographs. They care about seeing, here is a picture in this dark bar with camera A. Here is a picture in this dark bar taken with camera B. Wow, camera B is way better. And that's one of the things that you can do when you have these hyper megapixel sensors. You have the sensor is taking multiple samples, multiple guesses as what should be in that place that is, to the human eye, practically blacked out. And Samsung is now coming out, I think has come out with a brand new brand new camera sensor that's certainly going to be in next year's Samsung phones.
Yeah.
Again, but it would be a more interesting tidbit if it were in Google's hands or Apple's hands, because Google and Apple, when it comes to cameras, they are very much fixated on that. I want the user to, there's a reason why the primary control on this camera is one big round white button that you click and you expect to get a really great photo from. Google gets it, Apple gets it. Samsung doesn't necessarily get it. If Apple and Google had their hands on this sensor, if they believed it was worth investing in this and putting this in their phones, they would figure out a way to combine that with the laser sensors and with multiple cameras and multiple lenses to figure out ways to turn back time and reshoot something if you mess something up, like you're indicating, or get pictures where the number of times where I've been walking through the city and I forgot to, I threw my really nice expensive camera in my laptop bag on a whim, and I forgot to charge it, so I only got to take like 10 pictures before the battery crapped out, and then I spent the rest of the time with my 3-year-old phone. The number of times I've looked at that, like my camera roll that's been on in Adobe Lightroom back home, it sickens me that the pictures that this phone took, because so much of the engineering is in making active decisions on how to fix that sky and how to deal with that really, really dark foreground and how to freeze that action in that section of the frame. It almost sickens me that this 3-year-old phone is way better at these things. So that's what I'm looking at. I think I'm glad that we're way past the days where companies used to be able to advertise a camera or a phone by, the old one had 3 megapixels. Ours has 5 megapixels. And we have an independent lab that certifies that 5 is a larger number than 3 and expects that to sell the phone. Now they really are looking forward to that time, that moment during the Apple presentation when they put up on this brilliant, incredibly expensive 8K projection, perfectly tuned screen, examples of these phone pictures again on this amazing billboard size screen, and say, yes, not only we're showing you A, B, but just look at how good it looks in a professional viewing setting. That this could have been a billboard in Times Square anytime from the 80s to the 90s, and would kick the butt of any professional camera that was shooting at that time.
Yeah. That's it, Lory. People don't care about megapixels; they care about having good concert photos.
Exactly. Especially when it's in the dark and there's a lot of movement.
So we are here with Lory Gill, managing editor of iMore, and Andy Ihnatko from the Boston Public Radio. But I'm sure all of us are eager to find out whether Leo is now buzzing Cupertino and Mountain View in his search for 5G. So Leo, where are you now?
Can you smell the air in the MacBreak Weekly studio? No, that's not Andy Ihnatko. That's although he is spring fresh. It is our Molecule air freshener. I am such a believer in the Molecule. It really was a solution for our house. Lisa, we moved to the country, and Lisa got allergies all of a sudden from all the pollen and dust in the air. She was waking up every morning with a headache. It was no fun for her, no fun for me either, until we got the Molecule. Molecule has reinvented how an air purifier works, and man, it really works. When Lisa sleeps somewhere else, she knows because she gets that headache again, but not in our bedroom. We liked it so much, we got a Molecule for our son, Michael. We have a Molecule now in the studio. Molecule is reimagining the future of clean air with their amazing air purifier. It's not a HEPA filter. Let me be clear about this. The HEPA filter was invented during World War II. It really hasn't changed since. It does what it does well, which is basically trap big particles. But that's not the whole source, not the whole story of air pollution in your house. It's also really tiny particles that HEPA filters just pass right through. Viruses, volatile organic compounds, paint, formaldehyde, mold. These are, in fact, the most dangerous pollutants in your home. Molecule uses something they call PECO, photoelectrochemical oxidation. It goes well beyond the HEPA filter. It doesn't just capture allergens, mold, bacteria, viruses, airborne chemicals. It destroys them. It destroys them, including pollutants 1,000 times smaller than those a HEPA filter can catch. McMolecule's technology has been personally effective in our house, but it's also verified by science and, most importantly, tested by real people. Allergy and asthma sufferers around the country are rejoicing. We are, I know. Molecule's technology was funded by the EPA, extensively tested not only by people like us, but verified by third parties and university laboratories like the University of South Florida's Center for Biological Defense and the University of Minnesota's Particle Calibration Laboratory. Molecule is very easy to use. It's beautiful. It's this aluminum tube. It's kind of like the Apple of air purifiers. And I love it that it's got a subscription service for the filters. In fact, I've paired my phone to the Molecule, and when the Molecule filters get low, it automatically orders new filters. They come in the mail, and I pop them in, so we're always up to date on our Molecule. I think this is fantastic. By the way, it does not, if you don't want to use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth with your Molecule, you don't have to. It's got a nice control on the top. Really easy to change the filters too. You just pop a button, raise it up, pop in the new filter. I am such a fan of the Molecule, and you better believe we got it running at home and at work all the time. For $75 off your first order, visit molecule.com. That's Molecule with a K, MOLEKULE.com. Use the promo code MacBreak. You get $75 off that first order. Molecule.com. Promo code MacBreak. We thank Molecule for the fresh air and for the support of MacBreak Weekly. Now back to the show.
So one of my favorite ongoing narratives is that Apple keeps canceling special projects. And I've joked in the past that if we could have had this level of scrutiny back when the iPhone was being made, we would have seen headlines like Apple shelves tablet project, Apple destroys Tony Fidel's dreams and doesn't make his iPod phone, Apple has secret project room, smells like pizza where they're working on a Mac phone. It's just, there's so much you can pull from these, but we keep getting these stories about stuff being canceled, followed almost immediately by stories of them still being in active development. And one of the ones we got this week was a story about Apple working on gaze tracking to make AR and VR faster and more accurate. And I know in the past, Andy, we've talked about like what is the killer feature for AR glasses or a VR experience. And if it's just maps, walking around with maps, it's probably not enough. But when you start to see different activities like this, what do you think about how they're shaping these products, or if they're still shaping them?
The thing is, Apple hasn't released anything. They haven't published any papers. They haven't. They really have done nothing. They've done nothing but offer their usual statement that we don't know, that we're not commenting on anything that we haven't announced yet. So they're not moving the needle at all. Everybody knows that they've hired a bunch of people. Everybody knows that they're working on something, but they could go the way of the Apple television set, where we know that they're developing it. We know that they built it. We know that they are thinking about what to do with it, but maybe they will just simply, it'll go to the land of ghosts and winds. So they're really having absolutely no influence whatsoever, whereas pretty much every other company that knows how to handle a graphics processor is doing something. They're giving, the most important thing that they're doing for the category is putting hardware in the hands of developers so that they can then figure out ways to use this, either in gaming and therapy and in commerce, all these ways that they can implement these ideas, limited by the hardware or not limited by these new changes in the hardware. Do people want to wear a pod on their belt with a processor? Do they want to do it all with the phone? These are all decisions that are being explored and answered actively by all these other solutions that are out there. Apple really isn't doing anything. I'm sure that they're taking copious notes, but for now, we can't give them credit for doing anything at this point. Maybe, and again, maybe it'll be like the iPhone, where after sitting out this category for since the smartphone category since its inception, they suddenly appear because, again, they've been watching, they've been taking notes, and they know exactly what not to do, that they can avoid all the mistakes that everybody else made developing their product. Or maybe they'll just figure out that we have nothing new to offer this category and they'll just sit out. Who knows?
Yeah, what do you think, Lory? Like, do you think Apple should have actual hardware out there, even if it's not polished and perfect yet, like maybe arguably the first generation Apple Watch? Or are they doing okay just by putting ARKit out, putting it on iPhones, putting it on iPads, and seeing what people do when they're holding it without the benefit of it being on their glasses?
I think Apple would be smart to hold off until they have a hardware product that they can be proud of, that they can launch and be it would be successful. Apple gets the hardware scrutiny more than a lot of other companies out there. So if it's not perfect out of the gate, you're going to hear about it. Apple Watch is an example of that. You're right. The first iteration and the second and the third were probably less than perfect, and then it made it to the fourth iteration and became the most popular wear a smartwatch in the market. And I think it'd be a good idea for them to hold off a little bit. I think they are obviously working on AR. That's why I think earlier this week, they announced that they were opening a special art installation in a bunch of different Apple stores around the world. So what they're doing is they're showing us that right now, the phone that you have in your pocket, if you have the iPhone 10 or higher, is capable of an incredible amount of augmented reality. And here's some incredible things that can be done with just what's in your pocket. And then in the future, when they feel like they've got down, and again, Andy, just like you're saying, if they're taking all the notes, they're going to know where the pain points are, and they're going to try to make sure that they adjust for those when they finally do come out with theirs. My very limited experience with VR would be the Oculus Go, which is a lot of fun, but it's also not super comfortable. And I have a feeling that Apple would be able to come up with something that would be more comfortable, but also provide the same amount of technology on the inside as what AR and VR is going to be doing for us in the future. So I would say they should hold off until they've got what's good. I want a nice, thin pair of Jordy sunglasses, maybe, that kind of wrap around my head a little bit.
I want the Edith thing from the last Spider-Man movie. I think that's my style.
See that we're joking, but that is absolutely part of the problem, that people have seen this technology in so many movies designed by Hollywood scenic designers who build these beautiful devices. And so maybe people are not necessarily going to be waiting for the function of Tony Stark's Iron Man suit. They're not going to expecting to have Jarvis inside that lens with them, but they know.
So I think the one amazing thing about science fiction is that they tend to predict the future for us in to some degree. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has always been my frame of reference for like the future of technology. That was the smartphone. Dick Tracy, that was the smartwatch. These are science fiction stories that are now actual real things that are happening. So the idea that what we see in movies and on TV shows about the future of AR and VR, I am excited if that means that we're going to get stuff that looks like that better than what actually exists in the world right now, which is this massive machine on our faces. So, give me the Star Trek future in VR, and I am all on board with that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen those movies yet, but in a lot of them, they put on the glasses and then they see their world augmented. So like you can put your hand into an Iron Man armor thing and you can tell Jarvis to make tweaks to it. And because I'm still trying to think of the compelling use case, because right now it really is, you're just walking around and maybe it shows you maps, or the cliched one where I walk up to Lory Gill and it says, this is her significant other's name. This is where she lives. Did you talk to her about the rain? Because it hasn't rained there in 6 months. And like those sorts of things. But to me, the really compelling part is making you interfaces anywhere. You walk up to something, you don't need to pull out a phone. You don't need to pull out an iPad. All this stuff is just there and available to you opportunistically when you want it. But the science fiction thing does seem to, like you're trying on a new shirt or something, you're not actually trying it on. You're just looking in the mirror and the AR is layering that shirt over for you. It just seems like there's so much opportunity when we're no longer tied to those tiny little screens.
Yeah, and that some of that's going to come with a little bit of time and a little bit of research, because just like what you're saying, Rene, what is the future of AR and VR? To me, right now, I see it as something that's going to be, and AR is going to be invaluable to research in the future for medical and scientific things, and VR is games. Right now, I don't see VR being good for anything else but playing video games, which is awesome. But I don't know. I don't understand. I can't visualize.
You could go to Disney on your couch in VR, Lory.
I could definitely do that, but I would rather go to Disneyland in real life and eat their delicious foods.
And the other story, which was super similar to this, is Apple is, again, the car project was canceled, obviously, but Apple is still ramping up the amount of people who are testing these things out. And I'm going to throw this one your way first, Lory. I mean, again, to me, it's like watching the iPhone project from the early days of Safari Pad. And there's just no way of knowing what's going to come out the other end, or watching the Gizmo project before it became the Apple Watch. It's just hard to see what the end result is going to be. But when you hear things about Apple getting more testers on the road, does that sound to you like they're still figuring this out, or that they're starting to get an idea of what they want? And where is this going? Are they going to have their own Tesla autopilot, or are they just going to make a bunch of cool technology for something the future?
So you think it's going to be a long time before we see Apple VR glasses? It's going to be way longer before we see cars. That's what I think. I don't think at least we can say that AR and VR exists in commonplace, and it's usable and it's not dangerous. Cars are so far behind. The self-driving car is so far behind right now that it's going to be quite a while before, number one, it's stable enough to be used by people other than testers, and number two, before people like me and my mom and my next door neighbor and my best friend want to even get into one of those, because it's such a high risk thing to invest in, to participate in, that you're going to have to make me trust you in a lot of ways that I don't trust anybody to do right now. I barely even trust humans to do right now, which is to drive me around. So the fact that Apple is investing in a lot of research and development for the car of the future, the self-driving car of the future, of course they are. That's what everyone's doing. Whether or not the self-driving car of the future happens while I'm still, capable of driving a car, that I'm not so sure about. It might happen in my driving lifetime. It might not happen until, I'm no longer,
That's
have the
perfect
vision
timing, Lory. As soon as you're ready for it, it'll be there.
Yeah, it's true.
How should people interpret these stories, though, Andy? Should they be following them, or are they just like curiosities to note as you pick up your latte and head on out the door?
I mean, it's trivia. I mean, it's kind of like it really is like being on a fan message board and finding out, here's a shot that a passerby got of the next Avengers movie, and it doesn't mean anything. Saw some guy in a gray suit with spots all over it, and you saw somebody's boyfriend or girlfriend that indicates that maybe their girlfriend or boyfriend is part of the cast, and it's nice, but it doesn't really mean anything. But it's fun because we're fans and we kind of follow these things. It's just really difficult when it's a company like Apple that, again, they're working on lots of stuff. They're not going to talk about it, no matter how interesting it is. Compare and contrast to pretty much every other tech company that will, like, again, Google has decided that we know that news about the new Pixel 4 is going to leak anyway.
Yes.
Let's leak it ourselves, and we'll explain to you why we have this big unibrow at the top of the screen that looks kind of like off-putting. Well, it's because we put these really cool sensors in there, and okay, well, yes, we did put 4 cameras in the back of it. Aren't you going to enjoy that? And we'll explain exactly what it's used for 3 months in advance while you've got $1,000 burning a hole in your pocket, maybe for another person's phone. So we can talk about that sort of stuff when it comes to a Samsung phone or a Google phone or a Microsoft laptop. With Apple, again, it's fun. It's fun to think about what they're going to do with the camera. It's fun to think about what a iPhone Pro would be like. It's fun to think about what it would be like to have an iPad with multiple cameras. In the end, we just know that we're having a big sleepover. We got the popcorn. We've got the MTV Movie Awards on, and we're just gossiping. And we're not going to know anything until the big day comes. They actually announce.
That reminds me too. We saw, Google pre-announced Project Soli as coming to the Pixel 4. We've now seen LG's attempt at gestures where you sort of claw your hand in the middle of the thing and turn and hope that it does something. Samsung now has these pencil gestures where, even though I forgot how Andrew Martonic mentioned it, but it's like even though you're holding the phone in your hand and it'd be easier to actually touch it, you can still swipe above it to go through it, but it's kind of wonky. We're seeing LiDAR, we're seeing radar. Does radar have a place on your phone, Andy? Are you hungry for radar on your iPhone?
Ask me. This is something that you and I can commiserate on, Rene. We both live in areas that have this thing called intense cold during the winter.
Yes.
And the first time that I can interact with my phone without having to pull my glove off and lose a fingertip to frostbite, that's when I'm going to say, you know what? That was a really good idea. I'm glad I got this.
Yeah, the criticism of it right now is that it's not intuitive to do what you think it's going to do, and it doesn't do what you want it to do most of the time. And I think Google probably is best positioned to fix that part of it. And then once it does exactly what I want in the way that I think I want it done, I'm definitely going to want it when I have gloves on, Andy.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we don't have the double click and drag, the option shift click yet. Things that are completely not intuitive at all, but we all know. I can plop anybody in front of their first Linux system for the first time. They would be double clicking, they would be control clicking, they would be doing all this sort of stuff. But it seems like Google is starting small by simply saying, okay, do this to go to the next track, or do this in front of the phone to say shut up now. And then I'm sure they're not going to pile on with 100 gestures to begin with. Yeah, exactly.
Do you want that kind of stuff too, Lory? Are you interested in all the air gestures that we've been seeing?
As a fun thing, but certainly not as a feature that would, if it meant taking away something that I need and use on my phone or my tablet, no. But I think what is great about what Google does is they just go for it, and they let everybody try it out, and they throw caution to the wind, and they say, here's a feature. What are you going to do with it? And it's not kept in a box where only a handful of people are researching on it. They throw it out there. And then if it turns out that everybody thinks that this gesture-based control is dumb, useless, difficult, doesn't work, they'll pull it, and it won't be in the next phone. And I think they know that, and they're not afraid to try that. And maybe they don't. It's partly because they don't get quite as much heat when they do something wrong as the way Apple does it. But it's something that I've always been so impressed with Google for what they do, is that they're much more open, and they love to hear people's ideas, and they love to try new things and experiment with things like that. And this sort of gesture-based control is a perfect example. I went to Google I/O a few years back. It's probably been 5 years now, and they were first introducing the Soli. It was incredible, the minute. They were doing this, which if you're listening and not watching, I'm making the tiniest fiddle in the world movement, and they were controlling a digital knob by just rubbing their two fingers together. And that's incredible. And the only way that we get to things like that in this world is by experimenting with them, and experimenting with the world with them, and finding out what they're doing with it, so that we can further that technology. And, there are definitely two different reasons why we do or don't use Google or Apple. And on the one hand, we may not want we may not want our phone manufacturers to know everything that we're doing with our devices, and that's why we choose Apple. But on the other hand, we might want to help future this technological world, and that's why we use Google, because they use that information to create new and better technologies in the future, just based on what happens in the wild.
Yeah, I hope that as soon as I saw the first Soli demo, and as soon as I got into the phase this year of, okay, this is a real thing now, and now I have to look at all the research papers of what researchers have been doing with the Soli developers kits that Google has been sending out, it really, really got me super excited, because this could be if Google does a good job of implementing this, and also getting other people and developers excited about this could be as transformative as the touchscreen, as multi-touch was for phones. Because we're not just talking about, oh boy, it's so difficult for me to press this button, for me to change the volume on this thing without having a gesture. But okay, here's something that's really, really out there, and this is from a research paper. Like, what if the Soli equipment that is probably going to be on the next Google, the next Pixel phone, will allow a developer of a music app or a podcast app to use this radar sensor to basically do whatever they want it to do. So imagine that I've got the phone just basically like on the table. I'm at my usual diner having my Tuesday morning breakfast, and what if I were able to simply take a salt shaker or anything like from the little caddy that's in front of me, set it in front of the phone, and then the salt shaker, which does not have Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or Lightning or anything, becomes a volume control knob, just simply because the radar can sense that this object is being turned, and then turn that into an active control. There are even some studies there was one study that I came across that was fascinating about because this radar, this millimeter radar, doesn't just hit the surface. It actually can go below the surface of certain surfaces. It can go below the surface of skin. And so one researcher was trying to figure out, would it be possible to figure out what someone's blood glucose level was through one of these sensors. And so they set up an analog of human skin. They set up an analog of blood underneath it. And this was highly experimental. This is not a practical demonstration, but they said that yes, we can detect blood in this highly artificial environment. We can detect blood glucose levels. That just shows you how big how broad this technology could be gone. And the last thing is, it's almost would seem ironic for Google to be promoting this, because a lot of the stuff that is being talked about by using gestures, they certainly can be done with cameras with a way higher CPU overload, but it could be done with cameras. But the great thing about sonar is that radar is that it doesn't image anything. It just returns feedback on what signal was relayed back to the sensor after it made its cycle of pips. So it can't really paint an image of who is here. Can't really paint an image of what the room looks like because the range of it is so small. So this would be a way of getting a lot of the features you can get through a camera with the privacy of saying, no, I'm not showing any pictures of anything or anybody. All it is registering is simply movement. And the Soli sensor, it really isn't about fine-grained figuring out where its strength is not necessarily detail of a radar image. The strength of it is the frequency by which of samples it can take. I think it takes something like 10,000 samples per second. So this would be a way for people to say, maybe I am willing to use this feature and have it on my nightstand without having to put like a Band-Aid or something on top of the camera sensor because, oh my God, it's right on my nightstand. So as you can tell, I'm really excited about what could happen for it. If it were a Samsung feature, I'd say, wow, that's going to be a great demo during the release event, and then we'll never hear from it again. But with Google, I think with Google, as with Apple, you would know that no, they have a plan for this. Whatever features they release with the phone when it first released is just the beginning, and next year we're going to see things with that sensor that could make people switch, because how many iPhones did all of us sell simply by virtue of the fact that we were using it in the office, or we're using it with friends, and people next to us were just incredibly jealous because they realized that I like the way that phone works and I can't do that with my phone. So
listen, Ihnatko,
Apple
if they can give me Daredevil's, if they can give me Daredevil's radar sense, I'm buying one tomorrow.
with the graphics though, without the graphics, it's not really much.
Yeah, or Peter Tingle, Spidey Sense, whatever it's called. I want all of that now.
You still won't be able to count the number of salt grains on a pretzel. And if you can't do that, why be Daredevil at all?
Not until Gen 3 at least. Okay, I'm waiting. Last thing for now, Apple is partnering we saw Apple partner for better aluminum in the past, Lory. They came all the way to Montreal to smelt cleaner, better aluminum. But now they are talking about sourcing even better gold. Is this a return of a gold watch, or is this just part of a more ethical and responsible supply chain for everybody? Well,
Apple's been pretty outspoken on their desire to be as environmentally friendly as possible, to have the smallest footprint as possible. So seeking out organizations that are better on the environment, but still finding the gold that they need for all of their devices. I think this is a good step in the right direction. the industry of mining for any kind of mineral in the world can be really damaging to the earth. And the longer we're here on this planet mining things, the harder it gets. So not only is this good that Apple is taking this initiative to try to get gold in a better way that doesn't damage the earth so much, they're also very good at being sort of the progenitors or the trailblazers for other companies to do the same thing. We've seen it happen in the past, and if they can kind of champion how good they are for being so environmentally friendly with how they mine gold, then we're going to see that happen with other tech companies in the future too, which is all of this is all good for our future, our children's future, and the planet itself surviving long enough.
And the salmon. You have to think of the salmon, Andy. All the salmon.
Oh, that's one of my that was a good video. You saw the salmon tubes. The video of the salmon floating through those tubes. So they're just rocketing instead of using to the spawning grounds instead of using a fish ladder. And I just wanted to download that and put the Futurama theme song on top of it.
One thing I skipped over that actually is really cool is that Apple's student IDs are coming to more schools. The minute I saw this, Apple's been using them internally at Apple Park for a long time, where you can just, instead of using your old-fashioned badge, you can use your Apple Watch or your iPhone to access parts of the company, that you have access to. And they announced it for schools, but there was only a handful of schools that were doing it. And now there's 12 more of them. And this, I know, Andy, we just talked about how dangerous it is to depend on digital devices for your security and happiness. But I still want this technology everywhere. I want this on my house.
Yeah, I'd be a little bit concerned about it in schools, though, because now the implication of students owning what could be a very, very expensive phone, and how it's a chance every time a student has to pass into a secure area or out of a certain area to demonstrate that, oh, no, I don't have an iPhone. I have a feature phone, or I don't have a phone at all. This is why I'm using the laminated pass card. I like to see things that can do the job without causing any real class distinctions between people. But if you can show me how it'll make the security compound nature of modern schools feel less like you're getting into and out of the Kremlin, I'm for it.
I was thinking of it as like this positive for college kids who are running from, the dorm room, or, they just got up in the morning. They're going to forget their wallet, but they're not going to forget their phone. And there it is for them every time they want to use. That's the first thing that pops into my head, is like getting access to, the campus areas where you need to have your student ID. And, oh no, I left my wallet at home. Oh wait, I've got my phone. I can get in this way. I think, if I'm not mistaken too, it's part of the wallet app, which also allows them to add money, funds to their student ID so that they can purchase food and things like that. So, college kids away from home. I have not been able to access this information. I have no idea what the interface looks like or how it works, because previously, especially, there were so few colleges that were even supporting it. But I believe that it includes a way for parents to upload funds to their kids' student ID, so that they can go get their lunches and go buy things in the student store and things like that. So. I'm glad that it's rolling out to more campuses. Andy, I definitely understand your concept of the sort of like class separation between the two, and that is something. There's a discussion to be had on that for sure. But if I'm just thinking about the joys and benefits of having this sort of extra way to get around, it's sort of like having Apple Pay, but it's for college kids and their campus life. So I do think it's pretty fun, and I'd like to see it on more campuses.
You're absolutely right. I was thinking of high schools in which that would be more of a distinction. Once you're in college, that's a totally different thing. I think once college is supposed to be like the real world with training wheels on, and you have to deal with that sort of stuff in the real world. In high school, we should protect kids and create an environment. In college, we're trying to teach them that, look, we don't. Your professor, He or she is really nice. He doesn't care if you fail this course. He's going to teach you really, really hard. But if you don't show up and you don't do the classwork, he's not going to get all sad. He's just going to mark you with an F and move on. And yes, that's part of it. You also made me think about how this sort of technology, whether it's embedded in a student ID or used in phones, can be used with, okay, this person does not belong in this dorm. But there is an outside door and there's an inside door, and maybe this person needs the safety of having a locked door between themselves and whatever they're trying to get away from. We will let them inside the front door, but not let them get into the housing area of it. So there are a lot of things you could do with this. There's a lot of possibilities, and yeah, it could be some pretty cool stuff.
Lory just made me think about all the kids going through and going, OMG. Be right back. Have to stop snapping so I can tap my damn phone and get in. I roll. And then for the 3 seconds that they tap, they want to make sure their friend doesn't think they abandoned them.
Just make sure that your son or daughter knows which card they're pulling out of the Apple Wallet, because if they're going to buy a burrito at 24.8% interest, that's a harsh lesson you don't want them to learn.
All right, we have Boston Public Radio's Andy Ihnatko with us. We have iMore's own Lory Gill. And for the last time, at least for right now, we're going to check in and find out where in the world Leo Laporte is.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, I interrupt this program for a word from the bravest. You want to talk courage? I ain't talking taking out the headphone port. I'm talking about taking out the inkjet cartridges. You know, most printer manufacturers, almost all the profit is tied up in ink cartridges. But Epson realized that customers don't like to have to jump up in the middle of a print job and go get more cartridges. They don't like the expensive cartridges. Customers, like me, want to put ink in the printer and forget about it. And that's the Epson EcoTank printers. You just fill and chill, because they come with giant super tanks that can hold up to 2 years of ink. That comes with the printer. So, and they're very easy to use, color-coded. You can't use the wrong bottle in the wrong tank. You put it in, and you've got thousands of pages of print before you have to buy more ink. And when you go back to the store in 2021, you'll get another 2 years supply. So you won't be back till 2023. Yes, you could say goodbye to the office store in your neighborhood. I won't be back till 2023. I love the Epson EcoTank. Great printing, really great all-in-one printers. They scan, they fax, they print, they copy. The color is beautiful, and these tanks just make so much sense. It's changing the way people print, and I think it was courageous of Epson. I want to just pat them on the back to say, you know, maybe there's a better way. Let's think about the customer first. I love them. Get the compact EcoTank printer for your home or office. Of course, we have both. So you can just fill and chill. Do away with out-of-ink frustration for the best combination of ease and value. Turn to the Epson EcoTank printers. Got a special deal for you now through the end of September. Now through September 30th. Free overnight shipping. So you can get that printer just in time for school. Back to school's coming up. Use the code EcoTankLeo at checkout, and that's for any of the EcoTanks. But the offer is valid only within the 48 contiguous states. There are some exclusions and subject to availability. Epson, epson.com/EcoTankLeo. My first printer was an Epson. I've been using Epsons ever since. Remember the tractor feed, the MX80? They've come a long way, baby. And now with these Epson EcoTanks, they are state-of-the-art. EcoTank printers. Just fill and chill. Epson. Exceed your vision. And every photographer agrees there's no better photo printer than Epson's. We've all been using them. I love them. Epson.com/EcoTankLeo. Now back to the show.
Okay, it is time for our picks of the week, and I'm going to get Andy Ihnatko to start us all off right.
This is one of my favorite things in the world, in that it makes my life less stinky as a person who has to travel with lots and lots of different types of technology, and lots of them are really weird shapes. This is from the camera company Domke, D-O-M-K-E, and it's just a protective wrap. And other companies make things are like this, but that's the word that you should look for. And all it is it's a little padded square of material. It's lined, it's like a little bit quilted, available in several different sizes. And on the corners of one side, you have like Velcro A type stuff. On the other side, it's completely covered in the other type of Velcro. So why is this so cool? Well, because sometimes you have something like you have an object like a camera that is so weirdly shaped it doesn't really fit in a bag. Well, this will wrap and you can conform it to a shape, and it will always be exactly the right size for whatever you want to put in it. So, for instance, like here is something that actually I'm part of the stuff that I've been carrying with me for like doing remote podcasts. So here's like, it's a little folding tripod, and here's like a little bendable extension for the tripod head, and here's a little clamp extension. And I don't have a bag that will fit this correctly. I have lots of bags that I can just sort of toss it in and it'll rattle around. But if I just put this in the middle of, if I treat it like a burrito, I can just roll it up. I can just roll it up inside this equipment wrap. And then when I roll it up and seal it like that, now the Velcro on the top grabs that, and I can simply fold the Velcro on the sides. And now I have a completely form-fitting bag that is exactly the size of that weird-shaped object that I wanted to put in there. And they do make them in all kinds of different sizes. I have one that's really, really huge that I usually use as a laptop sleeve, because when I travel, I don't know I have 2 or 3 different laptops with two or three different operating systems. I don't know necessarily which one I'm going to take, and I am just persnickety enough that I hate it when you buy like a laptop sleeve and it says, "Oh, this is especially for the 2015 Retina MacBook Pro," and you put it in there, and it's like, and there's like an inch. It's the bag is like the sleeve is just an inch too big. It's not like form fitting, but I can put this inside this equipment wrap, and it will be exactly the size of this thing. It will not shirk. It will not shimmy. It will not do anything of that stuff. And then when I want to use it on a 13-inch, on a 15-inch MacBook, I can also use it on the 15-inch. So I have a collection of these. And I always have like, at least whenever I'm traveling, I have like a lot of my equipment wrapped in these, because it allows me to simply protect it well enough. It's nicely padded. Now, if I put it in my laptop bag, I don't worry about a lens getting scratched, or I don't worry about if I'm traveling with a router that the cables will get separated from the router or whatever. So it's on my list of, if you buy this and you just have this around, you will find a time, probably 4 a.m. when the van taking you to the airport is arriving in 1 hour. You will find a very, very important use for it. I promise you.
Almost as good as Spider-Man webbing.
It seems like it'd be good for carrying shoes around too. Like if you have a really fancy pair of shoes that you don't want to get messed up in your bag, or maybe you don't want it to mess up things in your bag, you can just kind of
my blue suedes. How'd you know, Lory?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
The inside isn't like, it's not like it's coated with marble or anything like that. It's padded and it'll protect whatever you put inside it. So yeah, it's a good use for it.
Oh, terrific. Yeah. What about you, Lory? What do you got for us today?
Okay, so 12 South, about a year ago, they made this thing called AirSnap. And I've had one the entire time. As soon as they came out, I got one, because I carry my AirPods with me hooked to my fanny pack. I have a little like a D-ring on my fanny pack, so I hook things to it. And one of the things I hook to it is my AirPods. And the AirSnap is pretty amazing at being incredibly sturdy and easy to use. It has a little clip on it so that you can connect it to your key ring, or a zipper pull, or in my case, the D-ring on your fanny pack. It flips open on the top so that it's very easy to access your AirPods. They're not kind of trapped in one of those plastic containers that's really hard to pull them out. It's really easy to get them in and out. And just last week, or maybe it was even earlier this week, they released the twill version. So I have the beautiful cognac leather, which is really nice. It's got the patina growing on it already. Well, already, I've had it for a year. But the new one is the twill version, which is like just a little bit classier. It's if you're kind of more in the executive market and you don't want to carry around brown leather, or they do have the other color leathers, but I love this one too, because it's just kind of a little nicer for the dressier times when I'm out.
It's and more I'll probably Professor Jones than Indiana Jones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you, I've said this before, if you are looking for a case for your AirPods, the AirSnap by 12 South is my absolute hands down favorite. the features on it, the way it works, how rugged it is. Like I said, I've had the leather one dangling from my fanny pack for the past year. So it's gone on rides with me. It's been in the rain with me. It's been at punk shows where I'm moshing in a pit with me. It goes everywhere with me, and it has never torn or the hook hasn't messed up or anything. So they're incredibly rugged and reliable, and they're just, I don't know, their features are awesome. So go out and get one if you need one.
Awesome. So my pick is, I don't remember if we talked about it or not, but I do know that when Apple announced the $1,000 stand for the $6,000 display, there was a series of crushed souls in the prosumer display market, because after LG had discontinued the previous 5K, almost everyone and their Apple Store business rep were hoping that there would be a lower cost 5K display to replace it. Turns out not from Apple, but LG has come out with a new 5K display, all of their own, and you can get it from Apple. Now, Apple typically uses LG panels in their displays, so this, in all likelihood, is what Apple is shipping now in the iMac and the iMac Pro. So it'll look like your iMac display. It'll be calibrated like your iMac display. Apple's probably working with LG to make sure that it is as exact as it can. But of course, it doesn't have Apple industrial design. And for people like me, not having that Apple logo on is still, a horn effect, the opposite of a halo effect. It just, anything a user looks at should have an Apple logo on it if I were Apple. But since you can't get that from Apple, and if you are just not in the market for a 6K display for 6K, you can pick up the 5K version for, I think it's $1,200 right now, and it might go down a little bit over time. And it works with all of your Macs over Thunderbolt, including the MacBook Pro. There was some erroneous information at first about how many you could use and how, but Apple has corrected that. So on any Thunderbolt 3 equipped MacBook Pro, iMac Pro, all of those things, you can plug one or two of them in. And it'll also work over USB-C in 4K mode with your iPad Pro. So if you looked at that iPad Pro introduction and you saw them swipe away that Lightning port and wipe in that USB-C port and then promptly plug it into a monitor to do all sorts of fancy video editing and video watching, you can do all of that with this. So again, not ideal in terms of not having an Apple logo on the front or Apple industrial design wrapped around the panel, but it's a really good panel, and it's not back in stock, but it's newly in stock at Apple stores and probably elsewhere. So if you're in the market, you don't want to spend $6,000, you have a 1.2 grand option. So that's it. Andy Ihnatko, if people want to see you, if you want to hear you on Boston Public Radio this week, when can they tune in?
I'm going to be on Friday, I think 12:30. Check my Twitter at Ihnatko for the exact time. But it's going to be at the Boston Public Library again. The WGBH has a studio right there. So if you're in Boston, check out the Boston Public Library. Sit down, watch the show live if you'd like. And if you don't get to see it, go to WGBHnews.org. They will stream it live, and you can also stream it later.
And you'll be talking all about Samsung's new phones and Google's new betas on the podcast this week.
I will be talking probably about a certain executive's attempt to destroy the entire internet as we know it, because he thinks that the internet is being mean to him. I'm not going to mention any names. I want to start a surprise, but he's very, very high up in the American corporation, let's just say.
All right. And Lory Gill, what have you got going on this week? What's iMore up to?
Well, I might go out and buy myself that Aura Glow Note 10, because that thing is gorgeous. If it weren't for the fact that I'm saving up to buy a car, I'd be buying that right now. But
nice. The small one or the big one?
The small one, obviously. Okay. My best friend actually just yesterday bought himself an iPhone SE. He's going to downgrade to the iPhone SE right now. Is it really a downgrade though? I don't think so.
People, they're like Volkswagens. People who love them love them, and they will. Yeah. If Apple were to completely say we will never make a phone like this again, watch the value of that phone go up to like $1,500 on eBay as people try to collect stockpiles of them.
Hello. Oh, look, my phone actually fits on my face.
Yes.
Sorry, Laura, you were saying what you were working on.
Oh yeah, so I'm obviously it's all about Apple Card this week for me. So if you want to learn more about Apple Card, you can hit me up on Twitter. I put out the call. Any questions, I'll answer what I can. Obviously, there's some stuff that I definitely won't be able to answer, but I'll try to get some answers if I don't know them. And I'll be writing how-to guides, how to use it, and we'll hopefully have an actual review of it maybe early next week. I got to go out and buy some stuff with it, so we'll see how that goes.
Thank you for taking that bullet.
And that you will find at iMore.
Anything in the sick burn agenda?
Our next show is on Saturday night. We're playing with kind of an old punk band that's kind of been around for a long time, and so it's kind of awesome. So it's a big-ish deal. They're sort of having a reunion show, so we get to play with them, and that's going to be cool. So yeah, this Saturday night.
All right, and everybody else is going to be going and begging Leo to come back, because as much as we try to fill in for him, he just makes it look and sound and is just so great. So time to get back to work. Sorry, you gold bricks, but break time is over.